What's up, everybody? This is Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HawgSports.com. What a big matchup we have this weekend. Number 16, Arkansas versus number 7, Texas A&M. Jeff Tarpley at Gig'em 24/7 is going to join us to discuss the matchup. Also going to be joined by Curtis Wilkerson. Yeah, this is your Arkansas versus Texas A&M primer. All right, everybody. It's finally here. What a big game we have coming up this weekend. I mean, it doesn't get much better than this in Arlington. And before we get started, of course, I want to remind you, well, we're not going to do a lot of how to watch and how to listen stuff. I just want to let you know it's 2 months for $1 right now at HawgSports.com, HawgSports.com. There's no promo code or anything required. Just go to the site. You'll see the advertisement right there to sign up. It breaks down to 2 cents a day, 11 cents a week, and only 50 cents a month. It's a great deal right now to get in with HawgSports.com. Again, HawgSports.com. 2 months for just $1 at HawgSports. All right, let's jump right into it. So this game, get a little housekeeping stuff together here. This game is at 2:30 p.m. on CBS. You can also stream it with the CBS app or go to the CBS website. We'll have all that stuff on HawgSports with all the how-to-watch information, including a full list of radio affiliates, all that information. AT&T Stadium, 80,000 seats. There is standing room, but 80,000 seats in Arlington. It's going to be 88 degrees, no chance of precipitation. They have that retractable roof, so it seems like a lot of times when Arkansas has been there lately, it has been covered. So Texas A&M currently a 5.5-point favorite, and the over-under is set at 47.5. Typically, this isn't a super high-scoring game. It has been a couple of years, but typically it hasn't been. Last year was one of those examples where it was a little more high-scoring. So the main issues for this game, to me, like when I look at obviously the quarterback situation, I feel like Arkansas's got a better quarterback situation with KJ Jefferson, who came into the season as a starter, versus Zach Calzada. That doesn't mean Zach Calzada is bad. It just means that he's not as good as Haynes King was. And I think Haynes King has a lot of potential. I really do. But he's going to be out for this one. And, they've got a few more injuries, and we'll talk to Jeff Tarpley a little bit about some of that stuff. But when I look at the matchup, I look at a really stout Texas A&M defensive line versus Arkansas's offensive line. I think that Ricky Stromberg probably has a better chance of playing if he does over Wagner, but we'll see, because Wagner has that back issue, and those can be tricky, and Stromberg looked like he popped up pretty good. Now, the last practice we went to on Tuesday, neither of those guys were dressed out. So we'll see how that plays out, but Arkansas, I feel like, can absorb it a little bit better because you do have Luke Jones and Bo Limmer in the mix, and Bo Limmer was actually starting the Georgia Southern game ahead of Ty Clary, who started 2 years at center for Arkansas. So no, it's not ideal. There's a reason, as Sam Pittman said, you have a depth chart. You have a first group and a second group. But really the only change here that we're seeing that's major, I would say, is Luke Jones basically moving up to the starting lineup at left guard, where he challenged all fall camp and all spring with Bo Limmer, because Bo Limmer shifts over to the the right tackle spot. So just to make it clear for anybody listening, Bo Limmer goes from left guard to right tackle. Bo Limmer, who started Georgia Southern, is your right guard. Ty Clary, who has been the starter at right guard, is starting at center, where he's started 2 years of his career, not last year, but 2018, 2019. Luke Jones, who was battling for the starting left guard spot, is at left guard, and then Myron Cunningham at left tackle. And I would say the only thing that would change, like if Stromberg could come back, then, nothing else changes except for Stromberg going in as the starter. With Ty Clary probably being the top backup at a lot of spots. So that's how it could go, and we'll see. We'll see how that shakes out. But very deep defensive line for Texas A&M. So that is a battle that I would think Texas A&M might have a slight advantage in. But when you flip it to the other side, Arkansas's defensive line versus Texas A&M's offensive line, they replaced 4 starters from a year ago, and one of their key players might be out. The Tennessee transfer might be out for this one, so that's something to watch. But I just feel like Arkansas's defensive line is going to give them more problems than the other way around. Not that that's any disrespect to Texas A&M defensive line, because they've got one of the best in the country. I'm just saying the matchup, just as far as the matchup goes. And I think that's going to be a key point. We talked about Zach Calzada. Is he a better quarterback than KJ Jefferson? I think that Arkansas has the edge in the quarterback matchup in this one. which we haven't been able to say for the last several years. So that's something that's different about this game, and it's a big factor with it. So there's a lot of interesting ins and outs with this team, and we'll talk with the guys a little bit more about all that stuff. So pretty much for the injury situation, that seems to be about it for the major injuries for Arkansas, is those offensive line issues. Traylon Smith has been dealing with a shoulder injury. He was in a green jersey. Jalen Catalon still is in a green jersey, but he's been playing and practicing in a green jersey since fall camp. Traylon Burks was not in a green jersey, and that has been something that he's been, even in the full day on Tuesday, he was not in green, so that's good. First team offense and defense, pretty much how you would expect it from how we saw in practice. They were in a three-man front. Doesn't mean that they'll actually go three-man front. I think it's interesting because, they talk about being multiple so much, and it's like, okay, this game we're going to be in a three-man front. Well, this game we're going to be in a four-man front. It's never like we're going to mix it up. We'll be 3 and 4, some and some, So it's like been either or. So, but this one I maybe could see them mixing it up a little bit more. Arkansas does have some good depth on the defensive line. That's a real important matchup to watch, especially with a quarterback in Calzada who, he might be thrown to some different receivers. There's a couple of his guys, including Smith, who's also the return guy, their starting slot, who I guess is going through concussion protocol. My experience is if you're going through concussion protocol, you miss the next week's game. But they're saying day to day. But at least at Arkansas, every time I've seen somebody that had a concussion or concussion protocol, they didn't play the next week. So, kind of where things are. We went behind enemy lines, and we'll go over kind of how that article went here in just a little bit. I would like to see, just looking at the way the running back situation is shaken out, and we talked about this a little last week, but Dominic Johnson, I would really like to see him get more carries. He's from like 20 minutes away in Crowley, Texas, so he doesn't live far from there. There's a lot of guys on Arkansas's roster from Texas, but Johnson at 6'1", 235 has really been the surprise player. 15 carries. Only 15 carries for 132 yards and 3 touchdowns, not just the big lumbering back that you think. He is averaging 8.8 yards a carry. He has the team's longest run at 48 yards, and he was going in with the second group on Saturday ahead of Rocket Sanders on Tuesday when we were watching practice when they were doing the fastball stuff. So usually it's been Traylon Smith, then Rocket, but and I can't remember. I think Traylon Smith was in there, so. But I would like to see him. The 48-yard run he had last weekend, that was his last carry. He got back in the game, got the wind knocked out of him, but that was his last carry. And we got an opportunity to speak to him on Tuesday. I think maybe for the first time that we spoke to Dominic Johnson as a Razorback. So Arkansas's got a lot of good backs, and a lot of that is credit to the offensive line. Usually you don't just have 4 backs you feel good about rotating in and out. They're all a little bit different. I just think Dominic right now – I think I've said before, I think A.J. Green might have the highest ceiling once he gets pass protection and stuff down, gets a little bit more comfortable just because of his incredible speed. He reminds me a little of Bijan Robinson, reminds me in other ways of Alex Collins, and probably not as thick and stuff as I've mentioned. But I just think that A.J. Green has so much potential. And not that Rocket Sanders doesn't either, because he does, just a different kind of back. I think Sam Pittman compared him to Jonathan Williams, which I think isn't a bad comparison for him. But I really like the way Dominic Johnson is running right now. Just big, brutal to tackle. Would like to see more of him on Saturday, especially coming from so close down there. Arkansas is going to be able to hit the recruiting roads in Texas this week. They haven't done that. They've been able to do that, but they haven't gone out and seen recruits yet. They've been home, so they could go to Fayetteville games, but they want to get their routine down, make sure that everybody knows what to do in case something happens. But Sam Pittman's not going to be there. They're going to have coordinators running practices and stuff on Friday, which is walkthrough type of stuff. So the coaches will be able to get out on the road in Texas and get a look at some of these prospects for the first time. I mean, this is the first time that Pittman has been able to go out and look at prospects in person during this evaluation period. So that's a good opportunity for them, especially since they're in Texas. Danny West has more on that at HawgSports. It is a VIP article, but he has more on that. The 2022 Razorback football schedule was announced, not to look too far ahead, but big surprise. Arkansas has the toughest schedule in the SEC and probably in the country. Again, three-peat, as Sam Pittman said, national champions of hardest schedule. I mean, it may be longer than that, but under Sam Pittman, this will be 3 straight years. They open with Cincinnati on September 3rd. Cincinnati is currently nationally ranked. I think they're like in the top 10. Then they get this is nice. They open with an SEC home game against South Carolina. That doesn't happen a lot for Arkansas for some reason. Technically, this is an SEC home game that's opening up against Texas A&M, but it's in Arlington in a split crowd. So a home game, and then it's the Fighting Bobby Petrino September 17th with Missouri State, if he's still there. Missouri State coming to Fayetteville and Bobby Petrino. I mean, that's 3 weeks there, no weeks off. What's next? Texas A&M and Arlington. At least Arkansas is the away team for that one, so they don't lose the home game. So that's your first 4 weeks. Your 5th week is Alabama in Fayetteville, and then it's at Mississippi State. Then you get a bye week, a much-needed bye week, by the way. And then you get BYU at BYU, middle of the slate, middle of the season, middle of the SEC slate. You got to go to BYU. So tough. Who scheduled that? Why would you schedule that in the middle of the season at BYU? That's got to be an early week game. And then at Auburn. So you have basically at Mississippi State, bye week, at BYU, at Auburn. Coming off the Alabama game, coming off the Texas A&M game. That's a brutal stretch. You should three road games in a row with a bye week in there. And then it doesn't get easier. You step out of conference, but it's Liberty. Liberty currently is the 26th most receiving votes team in the coaches poll and 27th in the AP. Liberty and Hugh Freeze, November 5th, coming to Fayetteville. Does it get any easier? Oh, LSU's next. LSU in Fayetteville. Ole Miss in Fayetteville. Hey, here's a little stretch of home games, and then it's at Missouri. And I'm thinking that Missouri game, obviously likely to be moved to the Friday after Thanksgiving, but I'm thinking that they move it to Arrowhead because that's how it was supposed to be the last time. So that's the schedule coming up, guys, 2022. But we got to focus on 2021 because it's equally brutal. And this stretch right here is a tough one. 3 straight road games, and then you come home to Auburn. 3 straight road games, and then you come home to Auburn. Shouldn't happen. Shouldn't have to deal with that. Shouldn't have to go on the road 3 times, but it's Arkansas's fault because they had this Arlington game. That Arlington game should be, if anything, a non-conference game. It shouldn't be an SEC home game. All right. Am I ready to go to Jeff Tarpley? I think we are. So for those of you who don't follow Jeff Tarpley, it's at 247tarp on Twitter, and he's a good follow if you want if you want Texas A&M Aggie news. So we'll get to him real quick, see what his thoughts are. We've been communicating with Jeff throughout the week just to kind of get a lowdown on how things might shake out in this one. Jeff Tarpley, how you doing, sir?
Pretty good, Trey. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to have you back on again. It's been a while since we spoke. I guess probably about a year since we've had an opportunity to speak on this same podcast. But we're glad to have you on. And we do a little exchange here, so we're not going to go too far from our 5 questions exchange here. So you should be geared up for the listeners. Just want to jump into it, and if you could update us a little bit on the Texas A&M injury report for the listeners.
Well, I don't think it's any different than what I relayed yesterday. In the Q&A that went up this morning, the question marks remain offensive lineman Layden Robinson and slot Aniyah Smith. If they can't go, then that's going to be an issue. It's going to be an issue for A&M more so in terms of Robinson than it will be Aniyah Smith. Moose Muhammad stepped in, had a touchdown catch last week. Doesn't have problems fielding punts. So in terms of being a punt returner and in terms of being a slot, I think A&M's covered just fine there. With regard to Robinson, that's a little more problematic. A&M started Blake Traynor, who was the backup right tackle for Kenyon Green, and slid Kenyon Green inside. The move didn't work as well probably as A&M wanted to. New Mexico generated more pressure than what we had seen in the pass rush in the first 2 games. And most of it came from the right side of the line, which would have been New Mexico's left side. We don't know at this point what A&M is going to do going forward. However, there's probably a better chance. There's probably a better chance that Robinson suits up this week. We haven't heard anything to that effect, other than the fact that he was supposed to return to practice and he's day to day. Sam Pittman's kind of been under the, he's been kind of under the radar too as far as injuries. So both coaches employing a little gamemanship here in what is turning out to be a game that has far more importance now than what it was probably perceived to during the preseason.
Again, Jeff Tarpley joining us here with HawgSports Live. You can follow him again at 247tarp. Hey, Jeff, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the center. In the game notes we got, it was Matthews listed as a center, and then in our Q&A exchange, you mentioned that the freshman starts there. What is the dynamic, I guess, that happened with the center position and why it's different?
Luke Matthews has battled injuries throughout his A&M career. He missed all of last season. He's been problematic in both spring and fall camp. And then coming into the season, he actually played in the opener and then missed the second game against Colorado, missed the third one against New Mexico. So they just simply needed to have someone who they could count on a game-to-game basis, and Bryce Foster's the guy. And Foster he's a 4-star that a lot of Aggies thought could have been rated as a 5-star. He's 320 pounds. He's a massive, massive guy. He looks like an upperclassman physically. He won the Class 6A Texas State shot put championships in the spring. That tells you an idea of what kind of explosiveness he has. He hasn't had any issues necessarily from a physical standpoint. And interestingly enough, the first two games, A&M did a very good job of dealing with stunts and blitzes in terms of their pass protections versus Kent State and Colorado. Things tended to break down a little bit last week, more so in the run game, also more so with regard to pass protection. But he has been so far as good as you would hope a true freshman be, and he doesn't give up much physically because he's as big already as most SEC nose tackles. He's not going to get pushed around. There's going to be times somebody gets on his shoulder and gets some penetration, but for the most part, he hadn't any problems snapping. He hadn't many problems with the calls, and he's held up physically. So from that standpoint, he not only has a very, very bright future, but he's actually provided A&M with a very, very solid present as well.
Well, that could be a really interesting matchup to watch because Arkansas does have a mammoth on the other side also in John Ridgway, who goes 6'6", 320. So that will be an intriguing matchup. So far, Ridgway has really manhandled the centers that he's faced, but I don't think he's faced one that's 330 yet. So that'll be cool to watch. Zach Calzada, what are your impressions of his start to the season? What do you like about him, and where is he struggling?
Well, he came in cold off the bench. And it was a neutral site game, but it still wasn't at Kyle Field, so you had to deal with crowd noise, you had to deal with nerves, that kind of thing. For the first three quarters, mechanics were off, delivery was off, he was throwing the ball high. But the one thing he didn't do in those first three quarters that could have probably effectively ended the game for A&M, and what he's had a tendency to do in, let's say, contact work, scrimmages, that kind of thing, is throw interceptions. Particularly, it was interesting. Haynes King threw 3 picks in the opener. They were all between the hashes. Calzada tends to struggle more so outside the hashes. He didn't. Since then, he's had 1 interception in 41 passes. He's thrown 4 touchdowns, and he's averaging closer to 10 yards an attempt. So once he got his feet under him, you saw the best aspects of Zach Calzada come out. He's got a great arm, and I mean this. He's got one of the best arms I've ever seen come through A&M. I've been watching A&M football since the mid-'70s. It's kind of amazing to see the ball just kind of fly off his hand. He's got a very, very quick release. And that probably has been the root cause of the issues he's had in terms of his decision-making. and the turnovers, in that he trusts his arm so much he thinks I can get it past anyone, and he'll hold it a tick too long, and as a result, it gives the if the route's not run quite as well as it needs to be, it gives the defender a chance to undercut the throw, or he'll just throw it right to someone, or maybe he'll hold the ball too long and take a sack, and he did that a couple of times last week. But in terms of everything you wanted him to be, he's been those things. And it's interesting, too, because Haynes King was really played up in before the season started by Jimbo Fisher. He touted him in the media. He touted him when he went and talked to the faithful during summer gatherings in the major cities here in Texas. And yet now it's Calzada's chance. And so far, Calzada, he's played to his strengths, and he hadn't turned over the football. He's been a little more mobile than people wanted him to be. Now, again, we'll see what happens Saturday against a defense that tends to turn you over. And if he can avoid those things, then again, I think A&M – I think that's the key to the game. If he avoids those types of mistakes, I think A&M wins. I think if he doesn't, it becomes very, very problematic for A&M to win this football game.
Jeff Tarpley again from Gig'em 247, columnist, joining us. And just real quick, I had a correction I had to make. I see in the comments here. I guess I said Bo Limmer moving to right tackle, but it's I meant Brady Latham. Sorry, I got my BLs confused there. So, Jeff, back to this matchup. What do you see the key matchup being? I know I'm really intrigued with both, offensive line versus defensive line on both sides, but what do you see the key matchup being, and how do you see this one playing out on Saturday?
I think once you get past, hey, Arkansas lives on turnovers, A&M has to avoid turnover of the football. I think the next step is what I kind of wrote about yesterday, and that's the interior of A&M's run defense versus Arkansas's scheme and offensive line. Arkansas, you watch them. If you've watched Kendall Browse over the years and that offense, not just him running it, but also when his dad Art ran it at Baylor, and they've had disciples move on to other places, even to the extent that Jeff Lebby runs. Is the offense coordinator at Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin runs it. Alabama runs it to an extent. Is that you pull guys from the backside. And you also load up – most people place the tight end opposite the back, and Arkansas and in the Browse offense, you place the H-back tight end on the side of the back. But basically you're pulling people. It's power football. It's power and counter. But you're teaching that back to read those blocks, to be patient, and then cut that run back over the middle. And Arkansas has been very, very good at that this year. You look at their averages per carry. I mean, it's 5, 6, and 8 yards carry out of their top three backs other than quarterback KJ Jefferson. A&M struggled in the first 6 quarters of the season in terms of its run defense. There were some elements to that. They were missing McKinley Jackson, who is now back, 330-pound nose tackle, who was a highly rated 4-star coming out of high school and was part of the rotation at defensive tackle last season. The backers, they haven't quite got the play out of the backers I think that they had hoped for. I think they're missing Buddy Johnson to an extent, who was the Mike backer last year, a true B-back gap to B-gap backer who could step up from 3 to 5 yards off the football, make plays at the line of scrimmage, or read blocks, cut in behind those blocks, and make stops behind the line of scrimmage. Aaron Hansford is more of an off-the-ball guy. He's 230, 235 pounds, and he can run. He's a great athlete. He's a converted wideout, for crying out loud. But he's not necessarily a true Mike in that regard, and so I think A&M kind of misses that. In addition, the guys that A&M plugged in Jackson's absence at the nose, they either haven't played as well as him, even if they've been big guys, in terms of commanding double teams and freeing those backers up to make those plays, or they've plugged in guys who are more akin to three techs. They've kicked defensive end to Marvin Leal down from the outside. They've also played a 5-star freshman in Shamar Turner. Both of them are similar physically. They're 280, 285 pounds. They have great get-off, but they're guys who are going to make plays in the backfield and maybe not hold ground as much as, say, a true nose tackle would, like a Jackson, like Bobby Brown, who was a 4th-round pick of the Rams and who was very, very good, very underrated for A&M last season. Now, however, in the last 6 quarters, A&M's run defense has been much, much better. The run fits have been better. They don't over-pursue as much. The backers are stepping up more. I think they've surrendered a grand total of like 170 yards in the last 6 quarters. It wasn't a goal line stand necessarily against Colorado. It was I think 4th and like a foot from Colorado's 5-yard line, so it wasn't a goal line stand necessarily. But since A&M made it stand late in the first half of that Colorado game, that seemed to energize and, in particular, refocus that defense, and they've been much better in terms of their assignments. Last week, they took a triple option offense in New Mexico, absolutely smothered them, never gave them a chance to breathe. Conflict defenders stayed in position. They didn't give New Mexico any good reads. When they had the opportunity, they put them in passing situations. They got after the quarterback. So I think with Jackson being back, this is a defense that's going to look more like it did last season in terms of that run defense than it did in the first 6 quarters of the game. And I think from that standpoint, the game's going to be won or lost there. Arkansas's offensive line is experienced. They understand alignments. They understand how to change up their blocks on the move. They get their hands out. They sustain contact. They do all the things that you see experienced offensive lines do. But A&M's defensive line, very athletic. They've got SEC size. And they rotate people, so they're not necessarily going to wear A&M out. As a result, I think it's going to be very, very fascinating to see if A&M's discipline and size and athleticism holds up against Arkansas's patience in the backfield and their experience up front. And if A&M can, one component is the turnovers. If A&M can also shut down Arkansas's interior run game, keep those backs from bending back behind the quarterback, then Arkansas's offense, which helps out the passing game, gets play action going in the passing game because you can run the football, then I think Arkansas has a much, much harder time getting its offense going. And if I had to bet on one or the other happening, I would bet on A&M simply because this is a really, really good front four for A&M, and not just in terms of the starters, but the backups are also quality players, and you've got unsung guys up front that are also quality football players. So I would bet on A&M side of the ball. But again, as we've seen in the last few years, hadn't been a lot of blowouts in the series, and that's why they play the games, and this has tended to be a one-score game going forward. I think, over time. I think A&M wins, but I think they win by 1 score. I've predicted in the past to kind of get out of hand. Those days are done until it actually happens. I'm not, at Arlington, I'm not going to make that kind of prediction.
All right, Jeff. Geez, leave some commentary for the rest of us, man. That was great stuff. Again, if you ever wondered if Jeff Tarpley doesn't do his homework, absolutely does. Fantastic job there, Jeff. Really appreciate having you on. And I guess I'll see you in Arlington.
Yes, sir. We'll
All
be
right,
there,
brother.
Trey. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
All right, really enjoyed having you on. Jeff Tarpley with Gig'em 247, columnist there. Does a great job over for our Texas A&M site. All right, I want to jump over to Curtis Wilkerson now. Curtis, if you don't follow Curtis, he's at Kurt Wilkerson _, which is a terrible Twitter handle, but he's got a really long name, and that's all he could come up with. So follow at Kurt Wilkerson _ on Twitter. And if you want to follow his VIP Razorback basketball coverage, which has been a lot of stuff coming out here lately, then you'll want a VIP membership. And again, it's just $2 right now for your $1 for 2 months. Even better, $1 for 2 months right now at HawgSports.com. All right. Let's get to Curtis.
Hey, Trey.
Hey, Curtis. I don't know if you were listening just now, but Jeff Tarpley just gave us insight on every single thing about this game. So there's not a whole lot left for you to chew on here. So we just jump right into to basketball stuff. He gave us plenty of information for sure.
Yeah, I think so. The one thing I will say about that, and it's interesting, I was kind of focused in on that Texas A&M defense, throughout the week. And one thing that he didn't really mention, and something that I haven't heard mentioned a lot, is about that secondary at Texas A&M. And you take a look, and a lot of that talks about that defensive line, and it's salty. There's no doubt about it. But by the numbers, this is a Texas A&M defense and a secondary that's pretty tough. I mean, they're allowing 77 yards per game through the air, haven't allowed a passing touchdown, 3 yards per attempt there. So they rank number one nationally in passing defense and passing efficiency defense. So I thought that was interesting and something to keep an eye on. Now, obviously, they haven't necessarily been facing, the type of guys they're going to see when they line up against a Traylon Burks this weekend. So will be interesting to see, how that plays out. But yeah, I think other than that, man, he covered it pretty thoroughly there.
He really did. We do a 5 burning questions thing, and you asked some interesting ones. The first one is this the year for Arkansas? What do you mean by that? Do you think this is the year that they take down Texas A&M?
Well, I tell you what, if it's not this year, then when is it? It's just so interesting. I think if you take a look at the matchup this season, it does shape up well for Arkansas. They're probably in a better position than they've been in several years. And, coming in, Texas A&M is still kind of trying to figure some things out. A number of guys who have been hurt that have been, working themselves back in, and obviously trying to get a new quarterback settled in there with Calzada. So, I think it lines up well for Arkansas there. But the thing about it is, with this game, you got to throw everything out the window when it comes to records and everything that the teams have done up to this point. So it's going to be really interesting. I think this is the best shot that they've had in a while, and I will be predicting an Arkansas win in this one.
So this is Arkansas's first game away from Fayetteville. They played 3 games in Fayetteville. I think it's kind of an interesting deal because – just looking ahead, you've got the trip to Athens, you got the trip to Oxford coming up after this one, but you kind of slide into not really a road game, and I mentioned this to Sam Pittman on Wednesday, but it's not really a road game, but it has aspects of a road game because you're traveling, but you still get half of your fans there. I think it's an interesting kind of way to slide into a road stretch here coming out. But I also think it's interesting, Curtis, that Sam Pittman's not going to mention are not going to take the players to the stadium before. He said that's kind of an old school way of doing things. They'll see the stadium for the first time on Saturday.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting too, and that was a really good point that you brought up in the press conference the other day about kind of having that split atmosphere before you jump in with both feet at Georgia next weekend. But yeah, it's true. You always wonder how a team is going to fare the first time they get out of their own stadium, and it's just a change of that routine, getting on a bus, getting on a plane, and the hotel and different things with team meals, and all those things are a little bit different. It just kind of changes up the routine. And so you have to adjust the focus a little bit there. But, another thing that Pittman mentioned there was, it's going to be a different background in terms of fielding kicks and punts and catching passes. And the environment's going to be a little bit different. So, yeah, that does kind of surprise me that they're not going to take the team there the day before. I thought that was fairly common. I guess it's not. But, hey, like he said, they think they've got plenty of time to kind of adjust and get acclimated there in pregame. Then more power to them.
How are you going to do like the Hoosiers speech about the measurements of everything? I mean,
That's right.
Do you watch Ted Lasso? I don't know if you do, but he did the same. He did that with soccer. He's like, I think you'll find the measurements of this pitch are the exact same as ours back in Richmond. And they're like, no, actually, this is much larger. This is the largest one, and like all the soccer fields are different. I didn't even know that they're all different sizes. But I don't
guess I realized that either. That's a fantastic show.
But I'm pretty sure here that it's going to be 120 yards long and 53 feet wide. I'm pretty sure it'll be the same. 10 yards for a first down.
Right.
Same deal.
Exactly.
So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but man, when you look at the numbers with Texas A&M and their pass defense, number one in the country, only allowing 77.3 passing yards per game, which is just phenomenal. Only 62.2% efficiency and 47.4% completion percentage. 3 yards per attempt. Those are incredible numbers. I don't care who you're playing.
Right. That's really, really good. And that's kind of what I noted out there. I don't know the teams that they've played necessarily air it out a whole bunch. We've seen that Colorado offense in particular really struggle throughout the season. But man, it's hard to argue with that kind of production. I'm going to be really interested to see. They've got some players in there who have really stepped up for him. Leon O'Neal is one who's made a significant leap, I think, from last season. He's got 4 pass breakups, a couple interceptions early on. Heard a lot of really good things at corner on Jalen Jones. He's been very solid, and I know that they're really happy with the way Antonio Johnson has really busted out this season at nickel. He leads the team right now with 18 tackles. So, they've really shut down their opponents so far. Like I said, though, they haven't seen a Traylon Burks yet. So I'm just really interested to see how that matchup goes. But man, oh man, those are some pretty impressive numbers through 3 weeks of the season, no doubt.
Really is. Again, Curtis Wilkerson joining us. If you don't follow Curtis, it's at @KurtWilkerson_. That's the best you could do with a Twitter handle, right, Curtis?
That's the best I could do. I ran out of characters. I couldn't even put my full name in it.
Yeah, it used to be C. Wilk Hoops. That wasn't too bad. Maybe we consider going back to that. But
yeah, it's time for a change.
Anyway, Curtis handles all of our basketball coverage and recruiting, basketball recruiting, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And we're going to touch on that just a little bit too. I'm just going to kind of gloss over these next 2 points real quick, Curtis, because I want to get to those, and we're getting a little short on time. But
sure.
Playmakers, can they handle the playmakers? You point out Isaiah Spiller, who they're a fantastic running back. Devon Achane, I can't remember, but he's a All-American in track and field, so he's the backup running back. He can really, really get it. Jalen Weidermeyer really killed him last year. I mean, that guy, I felt like Weidermeyer and Traylon Burks and Jalen Catalon were the best players on the field when they were out there. And then Aniyah Smith, who, as I mentioned earlier, is going through concussion protocols. I understand it. They really like Moose Muhammad behind him, but he is an electric return guy. So that's going to be a big point that you mentioned. And then just wanted to get to the trenches, because that is, to me, on both sides of the ball, what's going to decide the outcome of this, as long as it's clean, as long as there's not just like a rash of turnovers and penalties.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I thought Tarp did a really nice job of breaking down kind of that weakness. People look at the run defense there with Texas A&M, and it has been better over the last game and a half, but it was really on the interior, and I do think that they kind of just have a different look, a different element when, getting McKinley Jackson back. That guy's a load. He's a big man, and so, to me, you see a guy like that come back, and it's obviously going to give the Aggies a boost. And it just makes, Ricky Stromberg's situation loom that much larger to me. If he's available and healthy, is he a guy that can handle that assignment without, requiring a bunch of double teams and things of that nature? Not to say that Ty Clary couldn't do that. I don't know, but that's a tough assignment there. So obviously have the eyes on that. And then, the other side of the ball, you mentioned John Ridgway. Speaking of loads, I mean, the impact that he's able to make there in the trenches could just be huge for Arkansas, especially going up against what is either going to be probably a true freshman there at center, or a little bit of inexperience. So definitely going to be key there, and obviously you want to get some pressure on that young quarterback at Texas A&M. So definitely a situation to watch.
I always say that, you can kind of wrap up the 10 Commandments in one thing. It's basically like, doing to others kind of thing. And I feel the same way with the keys to victory. I always feel like it's mistakes and capitalizing on mistakes. And you've kind of run through these as you always do. Penalties, turnovers, special teams, injuries. Those are always key factors. And you always add a nice fifth one here. And this week is 3 is nice, but 6 is better. And that's, if in the Texas game, Curtis, if they'd have punched a couple of those in, it could have been 60 hung on Texas.
Yeah, that's so true, and you're feeling good about everything that Arkansas was doing throughout that first half, but when 3 of those become field goals, and 16-0 is great, but like you said, you get one more touchdown or even 2 out of that, it just looks a lot different. And when you think about a series like this one with Texas A&M, where so many of these games have ended in one-score heartbreak, putting that thing in the end zone would be nice. And, Arkansas has done a really nice job of converting when they get in the red zone. But there's, you look at Cam Little, and 4 of his 6 field goals have been, I think, from 26 yards or closer. So you want to convert that at a little bit higher of a rate. And it's going to be difficult. Texas A&M does have a defense that leads the SEC, and they're 4th nationally in the red zone. They're only allowing points from their opponents 50% of the time. So that's definitely one to watch there as well.
All right, Curtis, we're going to change gears a little bit because there is a lot going on with basketball. And so what are your thoughts on Nick Smith first? He's got a decision date coming up. How do you think things are shaking up there?
Arkansas, I mean, the popular belief there was that Alabama was in really good position. And, they got Nick to campus. He was able to experience that atmosphere during the Texas weekend and got back home. And all of a sudden it seemed like the tides had turned. And, you expect that to a degree. People come out, get on those visit highs. And, you kind of want to wait and see how things shape up a few days later and into the next week. And so far, it's really seemed like Arkansas has been able to carry that momentum. And, Eric Musselman and the coaching staff have been over to North Little Rock a number of times since that visit to see Nick at practice, which, obviously showing their interest there, no doubt. But, hey, he's announcing his commitment next week on Wednesday. It's at the same place that Moses Moody announced his. It's open to the public. You sure would think that those are all good signs for Arkansas. You never know. This is a recruitment that's had a lot of twists and turns and back and forth. So I wouldn't say that anything would necessarily surprise me, but I do like where Arkansas stands currently enough to where I did put a crystal ball in for him earlier this week.
And where are things right now with Jordan Walsh?
Yeah, Jordan Walsh, that's so interesting. I kind of had him on commitment watch back in June after his visit. Just hearing from both ends and especially him and his family, they just really enjoyed their time in Fayetteville, and it just came across as so genuine, and it was. And then the further along we got into the summer, and the way he really busted out during Peach Jam and kind of took his stock to another level. He's risen up to a composite 5-star now because of the way he played over the summer and picked up a lot of offers. His recruitment picked up a lot of steam, and the further you get away from that visit, you start to wonder, is that going to fade a little bit? And then next thing you know, he transfers to Link Academy right up the road in Branson. So a lot closer, and you feel like that's a good thing for Arkansas. And, I think they're still in great position. And, if I had to pick a leader for Jordan Walsh right now, I'd say Arkansas is probably in a good spot there. Did just have a visit to Texas. That's probably the top competition to watch right now. And he has a couple more visits lined up. He's headed to Memphis this weekend, 2 weeks afterwards, going to Kansas. And we know how those guys recruit there. So, not a done deal yet, but Arkansas is in a strong position. He's so close. I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see him down for an unofficial at some point before he makes a decision. I think he was hinting at mid to late October.
All right, Curtis. I think we covered everything we needed to cover.
I think so.
All right, brother. Well, I appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Hey, it sounds great. Appreciate it.
All right. That's Curtis Wilkerson. Again, you can follow him at @KurtWilkerson_ on Twitter, and you'll need a VIP subscription at HawgSports.com. Again, it is 2 months for $1. Right now, if you want to read his basketball insight. When it's not just recruiting coverage, it's also his breakdowns of opponents and games and stuff like that. And his most recent article was just a breakdown on everybody that has visited so far for basketball recruiting. Arkansas, speaking of visitors, is going to have a lot of people on campus. Jackson Arnold is one, quarterback out of Denton, Texas, in the class of 2023. 4-star also. Zadavian Sims, a 4-star out of Denison, Texas. I mean, this is just a few I mentioned. Like a few highlights. Malik Muhammad, a cornerback out of Dallas. South Oak Cliff, who's a 4-star, number 70 player overall in the entire country. Braxton Myers, a safety out of Coppell, Texas, number 76 overall player in the country on 24/7 Sports. Jonte Cook, the second, a wide receiver out of DeSoto, Texas, number 45 player nationally, another 4-star. Anthony James, number 101 nationally on the composite, number 51 nationally on 24/7 Sports, a defensive lineman out of Wiley, Texas. I mean, you can just kind of keep going on, and there's more 4-stars. I mean, Danny West has the full visit list that you want to go check out at HawgSports, but you need the VIP subscription to do so. I meant to ask this about Curtis, too. Justin McBride named his Final Four, 4-star power forward. Down to Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, and Texas Tech. You can read, and that's a free article, actually. You can read what he had to say about Arkansas and his other finalists there, class of 2023. So, and as I mentioned, Curtis breaks down all the visitors that have come in to Arkansas this past month. Okay, get to your questions now. Everybody's got a question? Let's see. Facebook has changed things around for no reason again and makes the comments kind of difficult. So, and it's not letting me scroll. There we go. Super glitchy, Facebook. Fix it. All right. Scott Spurrell says must get in their backfield 3-man 4. Got to sack Zach. What did they give up? They gave up like 3 sacks last week. Let's see. Hogtoons says hello, Trey. Roderick McCullum Jr. Hey, Hogtoons. I've seen your stuff. You do good work. We need a HawgSports Hogtoons. Roderick McCullum says if we can pressure the QB, Hogs by 90. That's going to be. I think that's an interesting matchup with the nose because Ridgeway hasn't had any problems with centers. He's just been manhandling him. And this guy's a freshman, but he's 330. Hogs defense are looking good, so I'll be looking for a few turnovers and a touchdown, and that would be a whole lot of help for the offense. And I mean, turnovers are going to be played. I've said this before. I don't know if I've said this on this show yet, but I feel the way things are shaping up that Arkansas, if everything is clean in this game, and we know my favorite Houston Nutt quote, that ball don't bounce straight up and down. But if everything is clean in this game in terms of, equal on penalties, turnovers, the capitalization on those kind of things, then I think that straight up Arkansas wins the game. I think that they have a better team than Texas A&M does this year. And I know Texas A&M fans are crazy that anybody would predict anybody that Texas A&M. Of course, that's how Arkansas fans – I can't remember the last time I picked Arkansas to win this game. So that's how I feel about it. If it's clean, I think Arkansas is going to win the game. Clean for both sides. Definitely would be awesome to get a pick 6, says Billy Harper. Eric Fox says turnover differential will be one of the keys of the game. Always is. Turnovers, special teams, penalties, injuries, always are going to be keys to victory. Everybody likes to come up with this long list of keys, but if you don't include those 4, then what are you doing? Those are obviously major keys to victory. James Fortenberry says better not count us and the swarming D out. We have good defense as anyone. Casey French Fulton says, I'm not sure how much positive or credit to Arkansas, haha. I'm not sure what you mean in there. Crazy that the Texas A&M writer predicts them to win, huh? Well, I mean, I picked Arkansas to win. Billy Harper said, I'm glad to hear Curtis said of the A&M guy. All right. Billy Harper says they haven't seen a quarterback like KJ. No, they haven't seen a quarterback like KJ this year. That's true. They have gone against Haynes King, and Haynes King can really run. I mean, they've gone against their own quarterback throughout, fall camp and spring and all that stuff. Haynes King is the real deal, I think. I think he's got a chance to be really good, but not playing in this one. Adrian Jones says Vito will keep booming kickoffs for touchbacks. I mean, that's going to be a key role. They like the Muhammad guy just as much as they like Smith, so if Smith's out, then sounds like they still got a pretty good replacement, but Vito booms most kicks out of the back of the end zone. Needs to continue to do that. Scott Spurrell says exactly this game boils down to execution and who makes the least mistakes. Matt Thompson says Trey Knox is fully converted to tight end, or is he still splitting time? I mean, he still splits out, but he's been working at tight end when I've seen him over there. But I think it's just part of it. They're going to split him out Wide receivers work with tight ends a lot of times too in practice and, in drills and stuff. Arkansas wins 26-24. That's an interesting score, and finally gets over the hump with A&M, says Seth Duvall. Ross Rader says if he adds weight, he will be a matchup nightmare. He's talking about Knox. Kenny Harris says, do you think Sam Pittman might have a pick of Pollard on the bulletin board to use his comments to motivate the team? I don't know. I don't know if Pittman does that kind of stuff, kind of gimmicky. Aaron Anderson says, if Arkansas is able to pull off a win against Texas A&M, where do you see them being ranked, and how do you see the season turning out? If Arkansas beats Texas A&M, it depends on who's in front of them and who falls, right? But you're still going to naturally move up by beating the number 5 or 7 ranked team at a neutral site. And it's a CBS game, so a lot of people are going to see it. So if they win, I think it also depends on how they win. Do they barely win, or they win by a lot? All those are factors. But I think we're looking top 12, maybe top 10 if Arkansas beats Texas A&M. And again, it depends on how they do it. And if you do that, then you're looking at a top 10 matchup in Athens. How many top 10 SEC matchups are 11 o'clock games? Adrian Jones says, as long as Mark Curls isn't there, yeah, please don't be. Mary Beth Holmes Beeler says, I'm tired of Arkansas not getting any respect. It's our year to beat A&M, and then maybe we will get our respect. They're ranked in the top 25. That's pretty good. Arkansas 24, Texas A&M 21, says David Smith. Ryan Horn says, I think Trey Knox could be a difference maker this weekend if he can get the running game going. That's the matchup. Arkansas's offensive line versus their defensive line and vice versa. That's the matchup with this game. I really believe, who wins that battle, and both sides kind of have reason to think that they could be okay. I do think that Arkansas has a distinct advantage on their offensive line versus Arkansas's defensive line, especially when you consider the whole front seven with Arkansas's linebackers. I think that there's more of an advantage there, even though Texas A&M's defensive line might be the best in college football, might be that good. I just think Arkansas's offensive line is pretty good also. So, yeah, Arkansas might lose that battle to their defensive line. Probably will based on what everybody says. But I think when you flip it the other way, there's a bigger discrepancy. So, Destin Hoofman says, first time in a long time I'm not worried about the game. Comes down to special teams, turnovers, penalties, injuries. Injuries are going to play a role. Is Ricky Stromberg going to play? Is Wagner going to play? Those are really big factors with this one. Mark Jones says, if Arkansas wins, they have a legitimate shot at beating Bama this year. At Bama? I'll have some of what you're having. Joey Hutto says, I'm picking lower score. I think it's going to be 17-10 Arkansas wins. It wouldn't surprise me. Most of the time this is a fairly low-scoring game. All right, everybody. One more time. 2 months for $1 at HawgSports.com. That breaks down to 2 cents a day. 1.6 cents a day. Not even 2 cents. 11 cents a week. 50 cents a month. Guys, that's a hell of a deal. Sign up, find out what you've been missing out. If you've ever been teetering, maybe I would like to. I don't know. If you want to support the podcast that we do for free, all the free content that we put out on the Facebook page, all that stuff, how can you support? How can you help? We're obviously not doing this because we make money at it. Our bread and butter is the website, HawgSports, and you can sign up for 50 cents a month for the first 2 months. That's a great offer. So go to HAWG Sports, sign up. There's no promo code needed. Just sign up and you'll get the deal. All right, everybody. I want to thank Jeff Tarpley for joining us, providing his insight on Texas A&M, which was really impressive. Great insight there for him. Of course, Curtis Wilkerson always bringing it with Razorback football and basketball recruiting coverage. Just does a great job, Curtis does. And follow both of those guys at Tarp247 and at KurtWilkerson_. And get all their great content. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time. Walk and talk out of AT&T Stadium. I don't know if I'll do it in AT&T Stadium. It's always tricky getting out of there. I kind of have fun with getting out of Fayetteville. Can I go this way? It's kind of like the charm. I'm about to get run over. I can't find my way out of the building, that kind of stuff. But with AT&T, last time I was there, they did a bag check on me to exit the stadium. And I was trying to leave, and they were like, no. It was very strange. Wouldn't let me. Basically, I couldn't get out. It was a later game, I guess. But anyway, so we'll see you with the walk and talk out of AT&T Stadium next time. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, and we'll catch you next time.